Hi everyone, my name's Sarah and I'm the Manager for Research and Monitoring and Evaluation at the National Lotteries Commission.
Hi, it's Sanele Dlamini. I'm the Senior Manager in Operations at the National Lotteries Commission. It's one of those days where the National Lottery is here to take you through what we do on a daily basis and what we do as part of our mandate. We are a regulator for the National Lotteries Commission in South Africa. But on top of that, we also give grants. We make grants at the National Lotteries Commission where we support projects for good causes in the country. You will recall that we were established as per the Act of Parliament in 1997, but was since amended in 2013. We currently are looking at various sectors that we fund at the National Lotteries Commission as per our legislation. So today we're just going to take you through our focus areas and we'll take you through our sectors and subsectors in terms of what the lottery funds. Sarah?
Yeah, thanks Anele. Just a little bit of background of how we came to develop the focus areas. So we always have an annual review of the focus areas where we look at what worked, what didn't work in a particular funding period, and we make adjustments and recommendations based on our experiences of administering and distributing the funding. But we also do a lot of research. So we will look at, for example, government policy documents, we'll check statistics, and we'll look at risk review reports around what are some of the key risks facing the country and the sector in the current moment. And we use all of that information as well as what other funders are doing to come up and formulate the new focus areas for any particular funding year. So this year, for example, as we all know, we've just been through a very tough, almost 2 years where we've all been living under a state of disaster due to the COVID-19 pandemic, which has had a very bad effect on not only the economy, but also on society and on people's health and well-being in general. So that is something that we looked at very strongly in terms of our approach to and the decisions that we made around the areas that we're going to be funding this year. The other things that we looked at are things like climate change, as well as the socioeconomic conditions in the country, and all of those have been taken into account in the way that we've crafted the focus areas. And then just lastly, for a number of years now, and this is continuing, but perhaps with slightly more emphasis this time around, is the idea of using integrated funding. So we don't just fund standalone programs. We want to see programs and projects that integrate more than one aspect of a particular area of funding. In that way, we can have a more holistic approach, we can achieve greater impact, and we can have funding that works better for everybody.
It's quite interesting, Sarah, that you are mentioning all these things. I'm just reminded that we also do listen to our stakeholders through various programs. I'm talking Indaba, your provincial stakeholder engagement, and we also listen to the general government structures, like your statistician general will come to us and present to us at various stages in terms of, how the country looks like, in terms of poverty levels, unemployment levels, the education statistics. All those will inform how we view our, funding focus areas. But just to take you through how we are structured in terms of the sectors, we've got charities sector, which takes the bulk of our funding. It's 47% of our total budget for the financial year. And we've got the arts, culture, and national heritage, which is allocated 23% of our funding. Then we've got the sports and recreation sector, which takes 28% of our total budget. And then the miscellaneous for purposes of, all those projects that do not fall between any other of those three other sectors, we only have a 2% allocation there. So that is how our funding looks like. But on a financial year basis, you are looking at a total budget of about 1.5 billion. I mean, given the state of the economy now, we are actually dropping. We probably could even be around 1.2 billion compared to the previous financial year where we were at 1.5 billion. So that is how our structure looks like in terms of the sectors. And we are now going to go into details in terms of the focus areas themselves, as Sarah has just taken you through what is it that we would have done in terms of research. So we look at each sector in terms of, how we structured the funding. The first one is the arts, culture, and national heritage. We said it's 23% of the total funding, but there is an interesting development that you want to pay attention to in terms of the various programs within the arts sector. Because for the first program that we want to talk about, which is the Arts Development Program, we are allocating 45% of our arts, culture, and national heritage total budget, which is 23%. I just want to repeat this so that it's clear. The total sector is allocated 23%, but 45% of the 23% is further allocated to, the Arts Development Program. These are now program areas within the sector, or we call them subsectors. So this is what we do at the lottery when we structure our funding. We look at what the legislation dictates to us in terms of the allocation, and we look at the needs out there in the public so that we align ourselves with the government priorities as well. Sarah, do you want to take us through the overall goals of the sub-program?
So in terms of the overall goals of the program area for arts development, our first objective is to stimulate and promote quality and excellence in all areas of the performing, visual, and literary arts. We also want to foster and develop a strong sense of our national identity. The arts are a very important part of how people and cultures and different sectors of society express and communicate. So that's a very important part of our objectives as well. And then accessibility. We want to make sure that the arts are available to everybody in South Africa. So at a community level, we want people to be exposed and to enjoy access to the arts in all their various forms.
The envisaged outcomes out of these goals, the very first one, we'll talk to the broad-based access to all areas of performing, visual and literary arts for women, children, and young people, including people with disability. So we want to make sure that everyone has access with the focus on the youth. We also want to ensure that communities are exposed to the performing, visual, and literary arts. We want to ensure that participants trained to move into academic programs at secondary and tertiary levels. So we don't just want to have the arts where we just showcasing talent, but people should also be academically inclined in the arts.
Then the last part is to look at the measures to be supported. So these are the kinds of activities and inputs which the lotteries will support. The first one is to implement community-based programs which develop creativity and build a strong platform for the arts, as well as training. So participants or learners can be trained in the various disciplines, whether it's music or theatre or any other art form of the ones that are listed there. Lastly, we would like to see the creation of ensembles based on the training and skills that people develop, so they can make music and drama ensembles, or they can do small-scale audiovisual digital production. Essentially, it's around the creation of new original works by the people that are being trained. And then we would like to see people hosting productions or exhibitions, as well as local and district festivals where the productions and the new works can be showcased. And you can see that each element of the measures to be supported builds on the previous one. So we start with community-based programs, we move through to training and skills development. From training and skills development, we move into production, and then lastly from production to showcasing. And we would like to see at least 3 of these 4 elements to be present in an application for it to be considered to be funded by the NLC.
Yeah, we are trying to move away from being an organization that funds festivals. We want to have a fully fledged programs in the arts sector where there is clear extraction of talent from the communities. And, ultimately you showcase the talent. You don't just go and stage a festival and expect that National Lotteries Commission will fund you. You need to have a program approach towards your funding proposal so that we are then able to assist you. So I think it's important that we emphasize on that, Sarah, so that we are clear to our stakeholders that this is not just funding for festivals where people will just have sound and lighting, stage, and then they come to us for funding. We need to have a program behind your project. But now we are moving over to the next sub-program, which is cultural expression. The overall goal for this sub-program is development and marketing of cultural goods. Here we are looking at your craft, your textile, your ceramics, your glassware, your pottery as examples of your cultural goods that you could consider. For income generation, I think we need to dwell on that a little bit, Sarah, because there is a belief that if you are in the NPO sector, you should not generate income. There is no revenue. There is nothing like that. You still have to generate revenue because we expect, as funders, we expect the NPO sector to be sustainable. So go out there, create your artwork and sell it. Generate income, use our grant funding as seed funding to ensure that you are sustainable. The only thing that you cannot realize is profit because we are non-profit funding organization as NLC. The other goal for this sub-program, which is cultural expression, is to increase cultural awareness, appreciation, and participation of targeted groups. So that is another goal for this sub-program, which is the cultural expression. Now, just to mention that this sub-program constitute 30% of the sector of arts, culture, and national heritage.
Thanks, Anele. And then moving on to the funding outcomes. And what you'll also notice is that there's a link between all of these different elements. So the measures to be supported speak to the funding outcomes speak to the goals. So there's a logical progression through the different programs. So the funding outcomes, we would want to see quality cultural goods developed, produced, and marketed. And then the other outcome is improved livelihoods for those designated groups through job creation and retention and through the income generated from these different cultural activities. And then lastly, the capacity of the target groups to migrate to other resource and support organizations. So we want to see our informal crafting groups getting to a point where they can actually go to, for example, a small business development or small enterprise development agency and apply for support from them as well. So they've actually graduated away from NLC funding to become more self-sustainable.
What are the measures to be supported? In other words, what do we expect the organizations or the NPO to be doing for them to be successful for our funding? One, we expect them to develop the development of institutional capacity of informal craft organization. In other words, we are looking at NPOs that will encourage the development within that space of the cultural expression. We want to formalize that space. So we need NPOs that will come up with initiatives that will seek to formalize that space and encourage the small crafters in the villages to come up and sell their artwork. We expect strategies to increase in sales of cultural products. We expect NPOs to develop strategies that will be able to sell the artwork that is developed by the people in the rural areas and in the villages. Participants must be trained in product development, product quality, marketing skills, entrepreneurial skills, financial management. So all those NPOs that will be training individuals in the communities to ensure that they have the relevant skills to sell their artwork, sell their products, to sell their cultural goods. Those are the NPOs that will be looking to support. Annual or periodic cultural craft fairs, pop-up shops, and local and district level. Those are the kinds of stores and sale points that we'll be supporting. So all the NPOs that will focus on creating those sale points, we will then be willing to look at as the National Lotteries Commission.
And just to emphasize on the last one, like we said in the previous program, Sanele, where we were saying we're not just going to fund festivals. Yes. Again, we won't just fund cultural or craft fairs. There has to be a program of skills development and capacity development behind that event.
The organizations that we're looking to support here will be the NPOs, NPCs, and public benefit trust with aligned objectives. I think we need to emphasize this, Sarah. The objectives must be aligned. You cannot be an ECD and come and apply for funding in the arts sector, for instance, because your objectives in the Constitution does not talk to that. The last subsector in this sector is the national heritage and environment. And this subsector takes 25% of the 23% of the total sector.
Okay, so the overall goals in this program area, and we've used the definition from the white paper on arts, culture, and national heritage, where it defines two kinds of heritage we have in the country. One is natural and the other is cultural. So we will be supporting programs that look at both or a combination of the two together. But essentially what we want to see is the sustainable use of these heritage assets for community benefit and revenue generation, which could be through such things as cultural and heritage tourism. And then we would also want to see increased awareness of and adaptation to climate-induced changes. We all know that climate change is with us. It's a very important area for the NLC to focus on because it is such a risky area. And we know that it's very difficult for us to stop climate change at this point, but we can start to assist organizations and communities to adapt sustainable and adaptive methods of dealing with the changing climate. So here we're talking about things like low carbon development pathways and any other intervention that supports the secure and sustainable livelihoods of communities using their natural and cultural heritage assets.
The envisaged outcomes of this subsector is increased awareness, appreciation, and participation of targeted groups, community participation in natural and cultural heritage, environment issues, and sustainable use of natural and cultural heritage assets. The other envisaged outcome is natural environments restored, conserved, and protected, safeguarded from effects of climate change, sustainable land and water management, and nature-based solutions for the reduced vulnerability of natural heritage. The last outcome that we envisage is improved livelihoods through job creation, retention, and income generated from the sustainable use of environment and heritage assets.
And then the measures to be supported, we would want to see participants being trained in heritage conservation and restoration, environmental management, and the sustainable use of these heritage assets, as well as marketing, which would include digital marketing, entrepreneurial skills, and financial management. Promotional products and services that are linked to the heritage assets, the development of those, as well as heritage and environment tourism programs or activities. These could be linked to specific national days or to histories or environments within that particular community. And then lastly, indigenous knowledge systems, which is our living heritage.
We all know that the National Lotteries Commission only funds non-profit organizations, non-profit companies, and public benefit trust. But in this particular instance, I think we need to emphasize, Sarah, that for the national heritage and environment, we expect NPOs, NPCs working in partnership with communities to preserve, restore cultural and natural assets. We cannot expect an NPO to come into a community and just inherit or take over the heritage assets. it has to be in consultation with the public. In other words, we will expect that the organization provides evidence that they are working with the community for us to be able to consider their application. So this is how the sector is going to be structured, and this is what we would expect for the focus areas from the National Lotteries Commission in the year 22-23 financial year.